I'm Eric Walker, Chair of Highlands Astronomical Society, and it's my pleasure to welcome club members, visitors from our North of Scotland sister astronomy clubs, and first-time visitors who are interested in tonight's talk and to see what we get up to. Now, it looks like we've got very clear skies tonight, and there are some of the regulars aren't here, and I bet they're in their cars away photographing things and possibly aurora chasing because there's an early alert on at the moment. So keep your eyes on that, and after the meeting, you might be able to get outside and see the Northern Lights for yourself. Anyway, tonight's timings, I'm going to do the initial welcome, and then we'll have our main talk followed by questions and answers. After that, the club news, Astropics, and the targets for the month will be presented by Pauline. Then I'll wrap up, and that will take us to the meeting close. As usual, there'll be no breaks in this meeting, and if you need to leave, just get up and go, but keep yourself connected to the meeting. That saves an awful lot of problems when you come back. Now, I'm going to leave the club news to Pauline, as I know she has done a sterling job putting it all into her presentation. We've probably had the worst ever astronomy observing and photographing season in our memories, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about that. Nevertheless, there is a core group of enthusiastic folks, some might say slightly unhinged, who take the very few opportunities we've had and they get their scopes and cameras out to observe and record some of the wonders of our Highlands night sky. You'll see the results in Pauline's presentation, which follows the main talk, which I'm going to introduce right now. I would like to welcome our guest speaker for tonight, David Newland. David is chair of the Cairngorm Astronomy Group and moved up to this area from Kent in 2002, setting up a successful wildlife touring business. It was this which triggered his recognition of the Glenlivet skies for astronomy and astrophotography. His drive helped secure accreditation of Tomintoul and Glenlivet International Cairngorm's Dark Sky Park by the International Dark Skies Association in 2018. He operates his own Pulsar 2.4 metre observatory at his home in Hillhead Croft, which he has yet to give first light, he was telling me tonight. However, he's here with us tonight to give us an insight into our ancestors' view and interpretation of the night sky. This is going to be a fascinating talk because I often wonder how the ancients perceived nature in general and the night sky in particular, and how they used it to help them run their lives. If you've got any questions or comments, could you please type them into the Q&A box or the chat box anytime during David's presentation, and we'll pick them up after his talk and present them to him. Anyway, it's with great pleasure I welcome David here tonight, and here he is to talk about Celtic astronomy. Over to you, David.
So good evening all. I'm just going to switch you over to a presentation so I can explain what was going on with the Celts. So here we go as I wrestle with it. So hopefully that's the technology working. If there's a problem, then if anyone who's if there's someone that can let me know, I'll be very grateful.
It's all working well, David.
Okay, I'll start off with astronomy. The first thing that you need to know is that astronomy and astrology weren't separated in those days. Astronomy is a science that studies everything outside of the Earth's atmosphere, such as planets, stars, asteroids, galaxies, and the properties and relationships of those celestial bodies. Astrology, on the other hand, is the belief that the positioning of the stars and planets affect the way events occur on Earth. So, as I just said, the Celtic Druids didn't make a clear distinction between astronomy and astrology. In fact, it's only since the 18th century that they've been treated as completely separate disciplines. It's likely, if you're admiring that, so a little picture I've got as an opening screen, that the Celtic belief was similar to that of many other people who understood the sky to be held up above the earth by pillars. I haven't drawn the pillars in, but at least I put you a flat earth in the middle, because that's pretty well what they believed the situation was. So moving on, the main question is, well, who were the Celts anyway? They're a group of Caucasian people who emerged in Austria around 1200 BC. Their language and culture were of Indo-European origin, and they were related to the Hellenic Greek, Anatolian Hittite, and Indus Valley cultures. They were adept blacksmiths. They arrived in Scotland around 700 BC. The next question, which I throw in for good measure, were who were the Picts, because the Picts were up here as well. The Picts were basically Brythonic Celtic people who spread northwards into Scotland sometime after the 8th century BC. Their name, the Pictii, painted people, was given to them later on by the Romans. They lived in small communities farming sheep, pigs, cereals, and other crops. Horses were status symbols to them, and the Pictish culture was based on the Indo-European traditions that were old even then. The constellations they saw in the night sky were similar to the ones from classical tradition because of their common roots. So who were the Celts? I've gone too far. Who were the Gallic Celts? Because the Gallic Celts were actually different from the Picts. And the Gallic Celts, you've got to understand that during the first millennium AD, a group of Gallic-speaking people migrated into Scotland from Northern Ireland. Their name, the Scoti, Scots, you might recognize the name, was given to them by the Romans. By the 5th century, their kingdom of Dalriata was well established on the west coast of Scotland. Gallic culture was based on the same Indo-European traditions that had formed Pictish ideas. As with the Picts, the constellations they saw in the night sky were similar to the ones from classical tradition because of their common roots. By the 9th century, the union of the Gaels of Dalriata with the Picts under Kenneth MacAlpin created what would eventually become known as Alba. So effectively, we've got two different groups of Celts amalgamating to form what we know as Scotland. And it's basically a combination of those two that I'm talking about tonight. So the next question is, who were the Druids? Well, they seem to have some long beards and be pointing up at the sky. Caesar's actually the most informative classical writer about the beliefs and customs of the ancient Celts. He writes the Gauls and Britons that they officiated at the worship of the gods, regulated public and private sacrifices, and gave rulings on religious questions. If one wished to contact a god, you have to do it through a druid. Druidic education was pretty onerous. It lasted for up to 20 years. The students learnt a huge number of verses by heart, encompassing astronomy, geography, and natural science, as well as a good deal about the superior powers of the immortal gods. It was not lawful for their knowledge to be written down. So that's why it's not easy to find out anything about what the Druids were thinking about astronomy. But there are ways and means. Britain was the place where Druidism was developed, and the students were sent there from Gaul to learn about it. This is the sort of stuff that we learn from this guy. That's Julius Caesar. And apparently he really looked a bit like that. That's one of the few carvings that was done when he was alive to have it done before they cut him up into little pieces, which he probably well deserved. And he tells us about the Druids, that they measure the periods of time not by days, but by nights. And when they celebrate anniversaries, the first of each month in the new year, they follow the rule that the night precedes day. So that's what the Celts were about. It started in the dark and got lighter as time went on. The next thing that I just want to have a little look at is the calendars. There were quite a few calendars about in those days. Julius Caesar was responsible for one of them. He proposed reforming the Roman calendar in 46 BC, and his proposals took effect on January the 1st, 45 BC. Yeah, have I caught you out there? Time wasn't going backwards, it's just it worked that way before the year zero. And the numbers went downwards. Anyway, the Julian calendar had 365 days per year. You're probably very familiar with that idea. And also with the idea that there was a leap year every 366 days every fourth year. And what that does is it gives an average of 365¼ days per year. And very happy with his work, Julius Caesar ordered that all the other calendars in the world were destroyed. So the legionnaires got on with it. And what you were left with was, there's a calculation down here. Am I tempted to give you the numbers? Okay, so it's a quarter, but they're actually 365.2421905 days in the solar year. And the difference between those two numbers is 0.00780948. Now, if you're wondering if I've gone mad or something, yes, I've been heavily influenced by the BBC, who've loved to give out telephone numbers in updates on the COVID virus over the last 2 years. So I just can't lose the habit. But anyway, the upshot of that is the accuracy of the Roman calendar wasn't bad. It was within 1 day in every 128 years. And Julius Caesar looked on it and he saw it was good. So it was standardized throughout the Roman Empire and subsequently adopted by most of the Western world for more than 1,600 years. But there were other guys on the blocks. There was the Celts, but the order was to mash them up and sort them out. So that's exactly what happened to their calendar. This is the remains of the Cairngorm calendar, which is a bronze tablet smashed up into 73 pieces by the Romans when they found it in the Sicani tribal area at Cairngorm in Gaul. So it's, I know it's not very readable, so I'll give you a hint as to what's on it as we go along. It was a lunisolar calendar covering a period of 1,831 days. It had a 12-month year showing 62 lunar months over 5 years. 2 intercalary months were inserted every 5 years to keep the annual solar cycle tolerable in synchronization with the lunar months. So that's that bit there. And just to summarize that up, the actual length of the calendar would have been, well, we'll forget about the numbers. They're all on there if you want to get your calculator out and work it out. The accuracy was 1 day in 48 years. So the Romans have it. They're significantly more accurate than the Celts at the moment. Unfortunately, the reconciliation with the tropical year in the Celtic calendar at that stage wasn't quite as good. There was an error of the best part of a day per year, which would have turned out pretty serious in the long term. But to the rescue, we have another Roman riding in. We have Pliny the Elder. That's this guy. He looks a bit knowledgeable, doesn't he? Anyway, he was incredibly so. He wrote a collection of tomes called Naturalis Historia, which was an encyclopedic work in 37 books, divided into 10 volumes. It was first published in AD 77. The subjects it covered included mathematics, geography, ethnography, pharmacology, mineralogy, human physiology, zoology, botany, agriculture, horticulture, sculpture, art, precious stones, and last but not least, astronomy. So he was right on it. And what we learn from him is that the Celts were actually able to improve their calendar. And the way they did that was they used the orbit of Saturn to do it. Now, Saturn takes 29.6501 years. That's its sidereal period. And that's the length of time it takes to return to its starting point, which in the case of the Celts, they were looking at Taurus. These are the Druids. So what the Celts did is they dropped 1 intercalary month every time that the sun returned to Taurus. Thus, the amended 30-year calendar was 1,831 times 6 minus 30 equals 10,956 days. So the accuracy of this little devil was 1 day in 195 years. So there's Caesar. I mean, in my book, the Celts win. Well, until you start considering the accuracy in relation to the solar year, because that again is pretty awful. it turns out, without going through all the numbers down there, that the accuracy of the Celtic refined the Celtic calendar on the solar year was actually only 1 day in 24 years. So you can take your pick. I mean, the Celts have got it on the moon. Perhaps you go with the Romans for the solar issue. You will gather that from the foregoing, the moon played a pivotal point role in Celtic astronomy. And the Celts actually had a 12 constellation zodiac. And that 12 constellation zodiac, as we first know it, was devised by Indo-European people somewhere in the Black Sea region just before 2000 BC. It evolved into 4 main branches. In the Hellenistic Greece, it evolved into the version of the night sky that was eventually adopted by modern astronomy. In the Indus Valley, Harappa civilization produced a second branch in the shape of the Vedic sky law and the constellations. At Hattusa in Anatolia, the Hittites formulated their own version of the night sky, which later influenced Assyrian and Babylonian astronomy. In Central Europe, meanwhile, the Celts developed a 4th branch that gave rise to Gaulish, Brythonic, and Gaelic interpretations of the constellations. So up here, I've sketched up what they thought the zodiac was. So I'm going to start here at the bull, because that was very much the same as the one that you recognize as Taurus. And then the next one along was, we call it Gemini. And in Romano-Greek mythology, that is sweetly referred to as the twins. There were nothing so sweet in Celtic mythology. They were called the rivals. And basically they represented the rivalry between summer and winter, which is continuous. Then a little bit further along, we have the horse goddess. And finally, it wasn't Leo, because lions, I'm told, weren't very common up in Celtic Scotland. It was the fawn. And there was a virgin, very much similar to Virgo concept in the Romano-Greek version. And then the scales weren't there at all. Instead, the Celts had a loop. And after that, in place of the scorpion, because there aren't many scorpions in Scotland, luckily, they had a sower. And the archer wasn't much different from what you'd expect, neither was the goat. The water pot is a nice sort of variation. Aquarius now. Over here, Pisces, that we might understand what is Pisces with 2 fish these days, is actually replaced by a single salmon, who is the wisest of all animals. And then finally, Aries, the ram, was pretty much the same as we know it now. So let's carry on a little bit. The night sky in Celtic times was a little different to what we have now. The constellations rose and set 1 month earlier than they do these days. The progress of the year in their calendar was marked by the position of the full moon along the ecliptic. The circumpolar constellations were not a great deal different from what they are now: Cassiopeia, Ursa Minor, Cepheus, Draco, Lara, Hercules, Corona Borealis, and Bootes. The closest star to the North Pole wasn't Polaris, though. It was Kochab. That's Beta Ursa Minoris. Now, this is a picture I took out the door when I lived at Easter Corrie, where I had my cottages. It explains what goes on at effectively the New Year for the Celts. The New Year was celebrated when the full moon appeared in the constellation of the Bull. But before then, at the new moon, a doorway opened up to the other world. Shortly after sunset, the great rift of the Milky Way, that's this bit, appeared exactly where the sun had just set. It doesn't do it quite so accurately these days because we're the best part of 2,000 years further on, but that's what it used to do. And So when they got to Samhain itself, that is now known as Halloween. But there's a sad story associated with this configuration of the Milky Way that you get at that time of the year. Deirdre falls in love with a handsome young warrior, but they're both killed in a battle. And the king's got it in for them because he has them effectively murdered. And they're all thrown in a big grave together. But there are problems because a tree grows out the grave. Two trees grow out the grave and intertwine. So he has them dug up and put on opposite sides of a large lock. And what happens is a tree takes root on each grave, either side of the lock. And what you can see happen here, you have to imagine the lock in the middle, but a trail of stars gather up each tree, which then twine back together and to show where the bodies were buried. So that's a story that was collected up in the Western Isles, I think in the 19th century. Anyway, let's move on. Celtic New Year, Samhain. That was reckoned to happen when the full moon appeared in the constellation of the Bull. There's the full moon in the constellation of the Bull. And second up from there was the constellation of the Rivals, representing the kingdoms of winter and summer and their ongoing battle for dominance. And then this is the horse goddess, which in the Gallic case represents Macha. She was one of the three sister goddesses known as the Morrigan. She was forced to take part in the horse race whilst pregnant. She won, giving birth to twins on the finish line, these gods and goddesses, because she was well unhappy with the way she had been treated by the people in those times. She cursed them, and terrible things happened to them, I think, for 7 years after that. But we'll move on a little bit further because we want to move on from the beginning of their year at Halloween to the beginning of spring. And that was marked by the appearance of the fawn or the young deer, and marking the beginning of the spring. That's when the full moon actually turned up in that constellation instead. And the fawn represents Ossian. Ossian was the son of Finn McCool, and what had happened is a druid had turned his mother into a deer before he was born, but it was found by his father's dogs, Bran and Scalan. Ossian was regarded as the greatest of all poets. A little bit further down the zodiac, we have the Virgin. In this case, it was Gerwin, who was King Math's virgin footholder. She was subsequently raped by his nephew. Well, they got up to all sorts of shenanigans, this lot. And this is the zodiacal, Celtic zodiacal constellation that came immediately after that time of the year, and is a ring or loop. And what that represents is it represents the annual cycle to the Celts. Moving on a little bit further to the beginning of summer, Beltane. You may have heard of the Beltane festival. So that happened when the full moon appeared in the constellation of the Sower. It's now celebrated as May Day. The early Celts northern Celts saw this constellation of the Sower and throwing seeds onwards for the following year. So you've got the Sower, and if you look down here, there's a lovely scattering of starlit seeds that is chucking out, which will hopefully provide crops in the oncoming year. Across the Big Ford, as they called it, we've got the Archer taking aim at something, a Sagittarius that we know now. And then the next constellation up is the Goat, that you're probably very familiar with. After that, we have the Harvest Festival, which was marked by the appearance of the full moon in the constellation of what they call the water pots. That's the equivalent of what we call Aquarius now. This was the Celtic Harvest Festival. It was and it was celebrated in honor of Lugh, one of their gods. So I'll just going to run over these constellations here. I've told you about the water pot, like Aquarius. This is our Pisces these days. To the Celts, it represented the salmon. A salmon was the wisest of all animals. And then finally, we finished going around the whole clock, and we've got back to the ram that we now call Aries. So now I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the planets that they were talking about. You must forgive me for taking liberties with these, because these pictures would not have been possible for the Celts. And Mercury is hardly the easiest planet to see at the best of times. It was nevertheless the star of their warrior god Lugh. And then we move on to Venus. Venus was, to the Celts, marked the passage between day and night at dawn and dusk. And if you think about it, it's very appropriate, because that's when that was the only time they could see it. It never turns up in the middle of the night. It's always quite close to the sun. Moving on, Mars, the red wandering star of the champion Ogmos, they called Goat. Jupiter was the star of their chief god, the Dagda, sometimes known as the good god, because he did good things, apparently. And at the bottom of the list, we've got the planet Saturn, which I've already mentioned, because in association with the Celts using the length of Saturn's orbit as the longest measure of time. And it's the one that they use to correct their calendar by dropping 1 month in every 30 years to keep their calendars straighter than they would otherwise be. So now I want to look at the south of the zodiac. So on those, we have, down there, we have, first of all, the Crow, that we know as Corvus now. That was a constellation of was a manifestation of the Morrigan. She had 3 aspects in the shape of the 3 sisters, and they all appeared as ravens or crows. Next along, we had what we call Crater now, and they knew this as the undry cauldron. It was Dagda's cauldron. It was his magic cauldron, and it was said to be bottomless. No man ever left it hungry. It was said to have a ladle that was big enough for 2 people to sit in. So plenty of stuff for people to eat. Just under those 2 constellations, the long constellation was known as the Kelpie. Going a little bit further, we come to a very well-known constellation these days. We call it Orion, christened that way by the Greeks and Romans. But the Gaels knew it as the Big Hunter. In fact, they still call it the Big Hunter. And it represents Finn McCool, who was a leader of the mythical band of warrior hunters called the Fianna. He's got a couple of dogs with him. This is Bran, his big dog, big hunting dog, and this is Scalan, his little hunting dog, who's off with him. These were the 2 that found his son Ossian in the woods. And down below Finn McCool, we've got, in the place we now know as Eridanus, we've got the Vale of Maeve. She is one of the Morrigan, and so that's her Vale, and that's what it's known as. And over on the right, there wasn't an awful lot of that they had to say about the whale, but this is that they knew this constellation as the whale, the same as we do now. So let's carry on a little bit. North of the zodiac, we have a charioteer, very much the same as the Romano-Greek version. But below the charioteer, we have a completely different pair of people in the position of Andromeda and Perseus. These are Tristan and Isolde, whom you may have come across in the King Arthurian legend, although I should try and pronounce these better because this one should be known as Drosten and Esilt to give them their Pictish, close Pictish pronunciations. And the story is that Drosten falls in love with Esilt after they accidentally consume the love potion. However, Esilt is already betrothed to the king. On discovery, they're both sentenced to death, but they escape together into the night sky. And you can still see them up there today. Now, Esilt is hanging onto the square of Pegasus, and this represents the 4 cities in the Northern Isles of the world. And in each city, there's a druid. So there were 4 druids in the Northern Isles. Well, this is where the 2 after the Danann, that's the Celts that came from Northern Ireland. It's where they learned their science and knowledge from. And those 4 cities were represented by the 4 stars in the square of Pegasus. Heading along to the right, we have the constellation that's still known as the Swan. For the Celts, this was Angus, the Celtic god of youth and love. As Angus slept, he dreamt that he saw the Celtic goddess of sleep falling in love with her. He followed her and discovered that she and her sisters were transformed into swans for a year every second Samhain. So he turned himself into a swan to be with her forever. So there he is up in the sky. Down just below the swan, we have a hawk, or we can call it an eagle. It's essentially one and the same thing. So that's similar to the Romans and Greeks. But over on the right in the constellation that we now call Ophiuchus is the Gallic god of healing, Dynashek, the son of the Dagda. And what he did is he had to destroy a huge serpent in order to acquire his knowledge of medicine. So predictably enough, here is this serpent that is busy destroying to get his medical knowledge. So it all turns out well in the end. Now I'm going to move on to the abode of the gods, because there's a part of the sky which was believed to be the abode of the gods. That is because they were eternal and they never set. Basically, they were circumpolar. That's why they didn't seem to set. And in there's some fairly key characters. This is Danu, the mother goddess of the Celts. Her name is commemorated in the River Don. Down here, we have the Afangdu from effectively Pictish legend, because the Gaels didn't have a lot to say about this constellation. So this was a monster that lived in a cave, and anyone foolish enough to go for a swim in the lake in the cave got eaten. Dagda, that's that constellation here that we now call Hercules. As you see, Dagda has a club, and he's also got his harp next to him, a harp that could play magical strains that could cause men to either lament or fall about laughing or made them fall asleep. So it was a worthwhile thing to have around. Down here we have Arianrhod's court. Arianrhod was the daughter of Danu, and sometimes called the Lady of the Silver Wheel, much more associated with the Pictish side of things than the Gallic side of the things. And over here on the right, we have King Math, who had to have a virgin to rest his feet in the lap of when he wasn't at war. Gerwin was eventually raped by Math's nephew, Gilfaethwy. So there was shenanigans going on all over the place. So I'm going to take you on to a picture I took of the Pleiades a while ago. The reason I put that there is because the Celts believed that that's where their souls came from originally. A little bit about the Milky Way. So here's a picture of the Milky Way. The Celts believed that the Milky Way was divided into several sections, which there were fords, and these in the legends, the Milky Way was known as the Bialak Nabo Fin, which was the way of the white cow. The bright spots were the fords where the herds of dawn crossed over. So this was known as the Big Ford down here. And this is the Ford of the Fork. So that's the place where I had that picture of at Semaine. You can see the fork down there. And there's the Ford of Maeve up there next to Cassiopeia. And finally, the Ford of the Wild Dog, the Madra Alta. So that's the way they saw the Milky Way. Moving on fairly quickly, about the lunar nodes. The Celts were good at, fairly good at their astronomy, and they treated the lunar nodes as if they were invisible planets. The north node was the dragon's head, and the south node was the dragon's tail down here. So I thought I'd better stick a dragon in as well, so to show you what they were thinking. But what it did is it gave the ability to predict lunar eclipses with tolerable accuracy, because you get an eclipse basically when you get two of the bodies, the moon and the sun, on the nodes. I think they, we'll go back here, eclipses. So total colour, a picture of an eclipse. The blood red colour of lunar eclipses, no doubt, then support the idea that they were caused by a dragon obscuring the moon. It's unlikely that the Celts would have had much success with solar eclipses. The problem being that the shadow of the moon on the Earth is so much smaller than that of the Earth on the moon. So whilst they were probably regarded as pretty good on lunar eclipses, they were rubbish on solar eclipses, a bit like on the solar calendar. And from that, I just want to move on to the subject of supernovae. This is a constellation that the Celts called the Fiery Eye. It actually goes all the way around here. And the name of it means fire eyebrows. So this was fire eyebrows, if you like. And I took a picture of this the other year, and I think I stumbled across the explanation for the name, because in the middle of it, you can see the Jellyfish Nebula. And this is a supernova remnant. Although it's not visible to the naked eye now, it may have exploded as recently as 3,000 years ago. And when it went off, it could easily have been bright enough to be visible in daylight. So I think it's quite plausible that the reason that this area here, and off to the right a little bit, was called the Fiery Eye was because there was a point for maybe a few weeks when it shone so bright that you could see it in daylight. Moving on to some stuff that's even more interesting, I come to comets. I'm not suggesting that Celts could see comets, and certainly they wouldn't have been able to see Van Manen's star. But Van Manen's star actually had a close encounter with us, with the solar system, around 15,000 years ago. It's a white dwarf. 15,000 years ago, it passed through the outer regions of the Oort cloud, reached its perihelion 15,000 years ago at about 3.1 light years. And that close approach seems to have disturbed a number of comets that were sent on their way into the inner solar system over the following several thousand years. And as a result of that, the skies were probably rather busier during the Iron Age than they are now. So this lovely picture here is a lake in Estonia. It was an impact that happened about 1,200 BC. that particular rock fragmented in midair and fell to the earth in pieces. And this hole was produced by the largest piece, which is a crater that's about 110 meters in diameter. Still considered to be a sacred lake. Local legends tell it was created by Thor's hammer. I think that these impacts from bits of comets and stuff had a profound effect on the Celtic worldview, whereas their spirituality had previously been very much nature orientated. I think that those events that followed on then forced them to reevaluate their relationship with the sky to explain what had happened. Their religion changed to one that was more focused on gods of thunder and fire, and the practice of the wicker man human sacrifices emerged shortly afterwards. So now I want to move on to Tuttensee, Lake Tuttensee in Bavaria. That had its impact about 350 BC. At that time, a huge fireball ripped the skies apart over Northern Europe, struck the ground in the Cairngorm region of Bavaria, almost entirely wiping out the local population. I think it probably did wipe them out to all practical purposes. The explosion would have been seen from at least 600 kilometres away, probably heard over 1,000 miles away. So you might well have heard the bang if you were living in Scotland. The first Celtic tribes who dared to move back into the area were the Noricans. And they found, to their amazement and joy, that they were able to make a steel so strong and sharp that it was largely unrivaled until the 20th century. This is probably because of contamination from the impact from the comet. And from that time, the Noricans thrived on a lucrative arms trade with the Romans, who called the ore Norican black gold. I've got another aerial picture of that that's been annotated a little bit. So there's the Tuttensee Lake, and they mark the moraine at the back and the rough outline of the crater rim crest. And the splodgy bit here was the fact that Lake Chiemsee was probably extended up that far at the point of the impact. It's now rather further away, but that's another matter altogether. So, moving on, it's worth understanding that not all impacts of bits of comets leave craters. Some meteorites disintegrate entirely in the air, leaving little long-term evidence on the Earth's surface. However, airbursts can still have the force of a large thermonuclear explosion and can easily cause devastation at ground levels. One here is the one that landed at Tunguska in 1908. I'll give you an idea of what it looked like afterwards. More recent examples are at Chelyabinsk, but I think they got lucky at Chelyabinsk because the explosion was higher up in the air. So all that was that a few small bits, fragments falling out. Whereas at Tunguska, it looks like it was a lot closer to the ground, the explosion. So when I look at this picture, I remember that before the Second Battle of Magtura, Lugh, the god of light, was seen to rise in the west. Another of his names was Lugh Longarms, which is a fairly apt description of a comet, because comets have long tails. And the whole thing seems to be an uncannily accurate description of what an incoming comet would look like just before dawn. Then arose Brest, the son of Baelor, and said, "It is a wonder to me," said he, "that the sun should rise in the west today and the east every other day." "It were better that it was so," said the Druids. "Why, what else is it?" said he, that was Brest. They said, "The radiance of the face of Lugh of the long arms," said they. The Battle of Magtura is said to have resulted in 3 days of destruction. And when you can see the look of Tunguska, what happened in 1908 up there, you can well believe that. There was a story that one of Lugh's most prized possessions, one of the four treasures of the Tuatha De Danann, was a magic spear that had to be physically restrained in a cauldron of cold water to prevent it catching fire and killing anyone in sight. So this is just an illustration of what somebody thought Luff's spear looks like when it was let loose. Scary stuff. Anyway, that brings me to the end of my presentation. I hope you found that interesting. If you have any questions, then I will do my best, or I'll just say help.
Absolutely fascinating, David. I love that. Having lived and worked all over Scotland through my distilling career, it's quite interesting to recognise many of these place names. You know, they were, you know, when I worked on the West Coast in the West, I recognise a lot of the Gaelic stuff, but I come from the east of Scotland, Brecon, and I recognised a lot of the Pictish names and the names, you know, that derive from the, or derive from the, you know, the constellations, some of the constellations you refer to. Quite interesting.
It's amazing how many Pictish words there are in our local landscape around us.
Yeah. Well, this part of the world where I am, it's got everything from Gaelic, Celtic, Viking, Pictic, the whole lot here. So, you know, this must have been quite a centre at one time. So, yeah, I'll tell you what I did love. I love trying to relate the constellations to the ones that, you know, we now recognise with the ones that you've got. And some are very similar, if not almost identical, you know, like the Big Hunter. That's fascinating. Also, some are really difficult, like, you know, Roshton and Esholt. I'd love to find. I'd love to get some of the reference documents, books, and whatever that you used, because I wouldn't mind doing a wee bit of my own research, you know.
Well, you have to be prepared to look at what's called astrology, because as I explained at the beginning, there was no distinction between astronomy and astrology. So an interesting book is Celtic Astrology from the Druids to the Middle Ages by M.G. Boutet, who's a French-Canadian.
Well, many of the most famous modern astronomers and scientists were famous astrologers and alchemists, and they were all right.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a wealth of stuff in here. I mean, it goes into it does Gaulish much more properly than I've done it this evening, but also Breton astronomy, and, you know, what the Bretons call stuff.
Yeah. And
yeah, no, I could give you the details of that if you're interested.
I wouldn't mind. I'll get in touch with you after. But here's a comments and questions. It's where do all the stories about the gods and the legends come from, or are to be found? That's kind of related to some of the references. And one in specific is, did Jupiter, which is, you know, as you know, is very extremely bright, did Jupiter have a god associated with it?
Yes, the god of Jupiter was Baghdad. That was the god of Jupiter.
Ah, right, okay.
And it was quite similar to the Roman concept, because Jupiter was, Jupiter is the king of the head god of the Romans, or Zeus, head god of the Greeks.
Yeah.
And so he got to be Dagda, which was the head god of the Celts.
My goodness, that's quite amazing.
Up here.
Yeah. Mind you, you started off your talk by saying, you know, those Celts, they came from, you know, well, Europe, Eastern Europe, whatever. So there must have been an influence from, you know, other Asia and North African things, who, you know, so there must have been an amalgam of accumulation of knowledge, you know.
Yeah, they're split up. Basically the Celtic model is very similar to the Greek and Roman model, because they came from the same place. They came from the Black Sea around 2000 BC. All of these stories and all of this folklore, and it also got down into India. So if you look at Indian astronomy, which is pretty accurate stuff, you'll find massive similarities between that and the Celtic stuff.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that does. I get. Yeah, I can see that. See the right. Well, what we call the planets now are the wandering stars. Did the Celts believe that all those wandering stars? Did they believe they were gods or chariots or whatever?
Well, they believe they were gods. So, for example, I finished with Luff, who was got his festival, Luff Nasa, in the end of the summer as the harvest festival, and so he was there, and he was there at the end because it was him that was said to be coming over the horizon as a description of a comet just about to crash a load of people before the Battle of Magtura. So yes, the Luff of the Long Arms, he was called. Well, it's a fairly accurate description of what a comet's tail looking like.
Yeah.
But those guys were unlucky enough to, have it coming straight at them and literally landing a short distance away.
Yeah, and so they could relate it to some,
And so that's why they were talking about the sun. Why is the sun rising in the west today instead of the east every day? Rises in the east. Look at it coming up in the west today.
You had, your picture of Savin. It actually showed the, like what we know as the summer triangle, the asterism, the summer triangle. That must have been as, that they must have seen that pattern because they obviously had a couple of constellations as well. The eagle or the hawk, I think you said, and one. But they must have seen that. They must have observed those three stars.
They did observe those three stars. They gave them names. But you've got to understand that what people see in the sky very much depends on them and what they've been told to see up there.
Yeah.
So you can see stuff. I mean, if you're an Aborigine, you'll see something completely different, and you'll have your own stories about what because you've had things. You've had your elders tell you what's going on for a long time. So I think you have to understand that when the Celts looked at the sky, there was a tradition about their sky. So that's why they knew what they were looking at in the sky. And that's why they called it what they did call it in their own unique way. Because just traditionally handed out. I mean, remember the Druids were learning everything by heart for 20 years before they qualified as a proper Druid. So they were probably then indoctrinating everyone else.
Yeah. There's an interesting question coming. The aurora, how the aurora was very important in Viking or Norse folklore. Is there any mention of the aurora or Northern Lights in Celtic lore?
I'm trying to think of specific. I mean, it's known. It's the what they call is the no, it's not the dancing men. I've got it in front of me. I'm sorry,
that's okay.
Brain's leaving me.
Yeah. It's like the Milky Way, for example. That was the Ash of Yggdrasil, the tree of life with the roots going into the another world and all that kind of stuff. And the aurora helped bridge, between our earthly reality and the God's world and things like that. And I just wondered.
I'm not sure I see any real evidence that the Celts as such talked about the aurora. They must have been aware of it. I mean, it was up there.
Yeah. Lisa said it's the Mirror Dancers.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Dancers,
what's modern Gallic lore. Well, certainly up as far as the Isles, yes, the Mirror Dancers.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a nice story about them up there because, the Merry Dancers, sometimes there is a red glow in the sky, and that's when they get over enthusiastic in their dance and they're fighting over a lady. And they get too enthusiastic, and that's called the pool of blood. And then if you're up in the Western Isles, you can actually find congealed blood. There are bloodstones that you can pick up in places along there, which are lovely coloured stones.
That's fascinating because just last month there was a few of us were doing our aurora chasing, and we had a red stroke pink aurora, which was actually visible to the naked eye. It was that strong. You'll see some pictures of that in a wee while. But actually, going back to the pics now, this is fascinating to me because of where I was brought up. But on some, like some forts, Pictish forts and things, there are big rocks and boulders with cup marks on them, which people debate to the nth degree about what they are. Could there be any relationship to, star patterns or constellations, or their constellations or anything?
I think on some of them there are, because I mean we've got near us, we've got a stone circle with 100 cut marks on it. Oof. On the big altar stone, and that looks like it represents the night sky. But right. This is nothing to do with the Celts. It was much earlier. It was probably 2,000 years before. And I think the stone at Rothy May, for example, that's got this amazing pattern of cut marks that looks pretty much like the sky. Was originally carved, not in situ, but in another place, and probably carved as a copy of a reflection in a pool of water, because it's the wrong way around. And I don't buy the story that it was some druid's device for teaching his pupils by putting some dye on the top and rubbing it over on the skin. But it's exactly the same way around as it would be if it was if you were just copying what you saw in a pool of water. Okay, so a stone gets carved like that, and then later in the late Bronze Age, someone decides that's a bloody good stone. We'll have that in our stone circle. So we'll put it down there. And what I'd suggest is that where you're seeing other cut marks on stones in picture monuments, if it's cut marks, it's probably much older than the monument itself, and it's probably been reused from another era.
Yeah. That could be. No, there was just the White Cat Thun again at the back of Brechin. That's got a pretty big boulder with, a considerable amount of cut marks. And I know there's one where I'm travelling down to Campbellton. It's just in the back end of a field, and that's another huge one as well. So there's it'd be interesting to relate that. I've got another question. How did the Celts explain the total eclipse of the sun?
I don't think they did. I don't think they could. I mean, maybe they could have related it to the lunar nodes and said, oh, well, look, that's what happens. That was about these invisible points and the dragon's tail coinciding with one another. But what you've got to understand is they couldn't actually use it as a prediction tool, because when you get a total eclipse of the sun, it only covers a very small part of the Earth. So if the Celts were trying to predict them, they were going to be wrong more times than they were right. Yeah. But the moon was good because you get such a wide track.
Yeah, and it's more frequent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, David, I'm going to stop that there because we're coming up to 8:30. That has been absolutely superb. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank you for this very, very interesting, thought-provoking, and it's a relevant talk for us Northern Scots amateur astronomers. I love the fact that I recognise your reference to Ocean right away. It's one of my favourite beers. David, you'll be receiving a thank you card designed and printed by Pauline. We'll just need to post them to you at the moment. And hopefully we'll all be able to get back together face-to-face in the very, very near future. So, well,
thank you for inviting me.
You're very, very welcome. I just thank you very much, well, once again, and I hope that you can stay with us and experience the rest of our club meeting, because I think you are going to be in for a treat, David.
Yeah, I will, definitely. Look forward to it.
Great. And now to the club news, Astropics and targets for the month. Pauline is back with us again to show you what our club and others up here have been getting up to. Again, she's got some amazing photographs taken by us enthusiastic amateurs. But first, she starts off by helping us to know what to look for in the early spring night sky. So over to you, Pauline.
Thank you very much, Eric. Right, good evening, everyone. And tonight's constellation is Cancer, the Crab. Now, although it's one of the fainter constellations, it's signposted nicely by Gemini, which Eric spoke about last month. We have Procyon in Canis Minor. And on the other side of Cancer, we have the distinctive shape of Leo with the bright star Regulus. Cancer represents the crab that had been sent by the goddess Hera to attack Hercules when he was fighting Hydra. That's the water snake. And Hydra is actually a very sprawling constellation that lies below the constellation of Cancer. And as you can see, the poor old crab was crushed under Hercules' foot and was then set into the heavens by Hera, who felt quite sorry for it. But because it had failed in its mission to kill Hercules, it was placed into a part of the sky where there are not very many bright stars. Now, when the sun reaches its most northerly point in the sky each year, we call this the summer solstice, and this tends to occur around the 21st of June. And it's when the sun appears directly overhead at the latitude of 23.5 degrees north. Now, thousands of years ago, this occurred when the sun was in front of Cancer, and is why this particular latitude is called the Tropic of Cancer. However, due to the precession of the Earth, where the Earth wobbles like a top, and therefore the pole star changes over time, when the sun shines overhead at the Tropic of Cancer, instead of being in front of the constellation of Cancer, it is instead in between Gemini and Taurus. And it doesn't reach the constellation of Cancer until around the 20th of July. Now, despite its faintness, it's actually easier to locate than you might think. So we're going to find Orion to start with. That's our big signpost, nice, big and bright. So we know where that is. And then we look for Procyon, which is almost on a level with Betelgeuse, but sometimes it's easy to get it mixed up with Sirius. So if we have a look at the belt stars of Orion, follow those down, that, remember, will take you to Sirius. And therefore, the bright star above has to be Procyon. And then up above Procyon, we have Pollux and Castor. And then if you draw a line between Castor and Procyon, and then join that line with Regulus, you now have a triangle. And in the center of the triangle, and okay, it's poking out a little bit, we have our constellation of Cancer. And it's a very simple constellation. It consists of 5 stars, depending, of course, always on which book and which internet site you actually look at. But unfortunately, the stars are faint. And they, in fact, the brightest one is this one, Beta, at a magnitude of 3.5. That's the brightest. So that means that unless you've got a dark sky, they're going to be difficult to spot with the naked eye. So why am I telling you about this constellation? Well, it is one of the main 88 constellations. It's one of the 12 zodiac constellations through which the sun and the planets move every year, throughout the year. But it has a wonderful, large and bright open star cluster, which I will show you how to find in a moment. First of all, we'll have a quick look at the stars. Now we've got Alpha, also known as a Cubans, which it means claw, and it marks one of Cancer's claws. And then Iota marks the other claw. So that's Alpha. And then we have Beta, the brightest star in the constellation. It's also an orange giant. And if you use binoculars from a dark sky site, it does look slightly orangey. We also have Gamma and Delta, and these are known as the northern and southern donkeys. And I'll explain why in a moment. And then we have Iota, which, as I said, marks the other claw. Now, Iota is a rather beautiful double star because it has components of yellow and blue. So it's very much like Albireo in the constellation of Cygnus, the swan. And you can see it with binoculars, but unfortunately, it's very difficult to see any color contrast with binoculars. But if you use a small telescope or even a larger telescope, you should get a really nice view of these contrasting colors. Now, this is the open star cluster that I have been talking about. This is known as M44 or Paraspe, the manger. And that is why these two stars, Gamma and Delta, are known as the northern and southern donkeys, because they feed at the manger. But we tend to call this open star cluster not just M44, but the beehive cluster, because it looks like a swarm of bees through binoculars. You'll probably see about 50 stars or so, maybe a few more, but there may be up to 1,000 stars altogether. Now, from a dark sky site, you can definitely see this as a misty patch, and I've found it quite easily before now. Magnitude is of around 6 overall, which is why you can just about make it out with the naked eye. And it's big. It covers an area 3 times the width of the full moon. So how do we find it? Well, surprisingly easily, even if you live in a light polluted area. If you find these stars, these 2 stars here, because from my light polluted street, I can see them. And they are roughly with a brightness of beta. So we're looking at around 3.5, magnitude 3.5. Put your binoculars on these and you will see this distinctive shape. And then simply move your binoculars straight up and you cannot miss this wonderful open star cluster. Okay, so it doesn't look quite like that with binoculars, but my goodness, it fills the binoculars. It's really lovely. And it's bright enough to see very easily in a light polluted region with binoculars. It's 577 light years away, and that makes it one of our closest open star clusters. And interestingly, it's about 600 million years old, which is the same, roughly the same age as the Hyades in Taurus. It also shares the same movement through space as Taurus. So it's quite probable that they have a shared origin, perhaps born out of the same giant molecular cloud. And before we were plagued with light pollution, people referred to the beehive as the little cloud because that's what it looked like with a naked eye. And it even served as a celestial weather station. And the Roman author Pliny reports that when it can't be seen in an otherwise clear night sky, it's a sign of an impending storm. And then we have M67, which is another open star cluster. Now, I couldn't see this through binoculars from my light polluted street. So you would need probably a dark sky to be able to see it better. And you can't see it with the naked eye, or it's unlikely you could see it with the naked eye, even from a dark sky site. It looks a bit like a misty ellipse in binoculars, better, of course, with a small telescope. But it's one of the oldest clusters known. It's around 3.2 and 5 billion years old. And remember, the beehive cluster was 600 million years old. So we're looking at billions of years with this particular star cluster. There are no stars that are brighter than spectral class F, and our sun is 1 down, G. So a little bit fainter, a little bit cooler than F. But that's because all the brighter stars, the bigger, the hotter, the brighter stars, they've either exploded as supernovae or they have become red giants. And remember, the bigger and brighter the star is, the shorter its life. And you can see that there are a number of red giants present. Now, any of the blue stars you can see, they think these are probably blue stragglers. So they're not proper stars that would have started out in this particular cluster. One galaxy that's worth looking for if you have a large telescope is NGC 2775. Probably only see it as a smudge because it's magnitude of 11, so it is very faint. But you could probably use a camera on it and get a very nice picture. It's a very unusual spiral galaxy with incredibly tightly woven spiral arms, and there's enormous nuclear bulge in the center. Interestingly, there have been 5 supernovae here within this galaxy over the last 30 years. So it would be worth keeping an eye on, because chances of another supernova in the next few years, I would say, were probably quite high. And then we've got this galaxy, which I decided I would show because it's so beautiful. It's magnitude 13, unlikely that we would see it through our telescopes. You might get something with photography, but I'm not sure about that. But these stars here that you can see with diffraction spikes, these are foreground stars. And apart from the stars that are found within the galaxy, most of the other stars around the galaxy are not stars at all. They're actually galaxies, which is quite an extraordinary thought. This is 55 Cancri. It's a binary star, 1 yellow and 1 red. 5 planets have been discovered orbiting the yellow star. The innermost star is a super-Earth, probably twice the mass of Earth, but it's so close to its star that its surface is most likely to be molten lava. So not really a place to live. Now, I can hardly believe that we're into March already, and the spring equinox is not that far away. It occurs on the 20th of March. And already, if you've looked at where the sun is setting, it's moved really quickly across the sky. And that's going to continue up and beyond the spring equinox. The clocks go forward. Remember, they spring forward on the 27th of March. And that's also Mother's Day. The new moon is on the 2nd of March, which is tomorrow. And then we have the full moon on the 18th of March. Now, I have mentioned the zodiacal light before, but again, it's always worth looking for. And this is because at this time of year, in the evening, the ecliptic is virtually straight up, well, not quite straight up and down, but it's extremely steep. These are the Pleiades. And the reason it's called the zodiacal light is because this light, this pyramid of light, extends outwards along the constellation, the zodiac constellations. You have to be in a very dark sky site, no light pollution and no moon, which is why the next few days would be a good time to go and look for the zodiacal light. So this is the ecliptic. This is what I mean by it being extremely steep, and that's why you can see it. The other time you can see the zodiacal light is around the autumnal equinox, but in the morning time, because that will be when the ecliptic is steep. But the interesting fact that I learned the other day, it's been known for 2 or 3 years now, is that the dust, because the zodiacal light is sunlight reflecting off dust particles, but the dust apparently comes from Mars, or so they think. But when you think about it, I mean, it's such a dusty surface. They have enormous dust storms on Mars. So it's quite easy that all this dust just disappears into space. Now, when the evening ecliptic is steep, it means that the morning ecliptic is shallow. So seeing the morning planets is really hard. You can see how shallow the ecliptic is. Venus is really bright, minus 4.4. The best time to see Venus is about 10 to 7 in the morning. Mars is much fainter at magnitude 1.2, and in fact will probably have its light drowned out by Venus. And Venus reaches its furthest distance from the sun, or its greatest western elongation, on the 20th of March. And then it appears very slowly to move closer to the horizon over the next few months. Mars will stay roughly where it is throughout March. But as I said, it's not going to be easy to see. And then Saturn joins them around March the 7th. But again, they're very low down. You need to have a clear southeastern horizon. But a lot, Mars and Saturn in particular will be lost in the twilight. And although this grouping is lovely, including the crescent moon, and this is right or very close to the end of March, when I looked up the app to tell me the best times to see the planets, it said, well, Venus, 10 to 7 in the morning, Mars, not visible, Saturn, not visible. And the chances of seeing the crescent moon would be extremely difficult. However, you might be able to get a photograph of this as long as you have this clear southeastern horizon. Now, just a quick update with the James Webb Space Telescope. So the scientists at the moment are working on waking up and calibrating the instruments, making minute adjustments to the telescope's 18 mirror segments to provide those sharp images that we will need in order to see deep into the universe. And there are 7 planned steps to align the 18 segments of the big mirror. Now, the first stage has been completed. The second stage, which is called segment alignment, this is when the team corrected the positions of Webb's primary mirror segments, which is what you're looking at here, and also updated the alignment of the secondary mirror to bring all these individual images into focus. So that's what you're seeing. And then the third of the 7 planned steps was that they stacked all 18 images to produce this one here. And that has also been completed. And the image itself will become sharper with future alignment steps. So the wonderful thing is that everything so far is going to plan, and long may it last. So on to club news. Now, it's our responsibility to tell you that our AGM takes place in April. And I'm sure you'll be delighted to know that all office bearers are up for election. Currently, we have Eric as chairman, I'm secretary, and treasurer is Andy. Now, Eric's completed 2 years from his election, but is happy to stand for further 2 if re-elected. I took over as interim secretary from Rona in October, but is happy to become secretary. I am happy to become secretary if elected. Andy has completed 4 years from his election, but the Constitution allows him to do 1 further year under special circumstances. And of course, we've had special circumstances with the pandemic the way it is. And he's agreed to do this if no one else comes forward, but we will need a new treasurer. So this is the time to start thinking about it. And remember, if we don't have all 3 office bearers, we don't have a club. So it's vitally important that someone comes forward. And Andy will teach you everything he knows. So it won't be difficult, and he will always be there in the background in case you get stuck. Therefore, if you wish to stand or nominate anyone, let me know. And if there are any items for the agenda, again, please let me know. Now, because we will be doing the AGM online, or most likely to be online, we will send out the papers before the AGM itself. And what we need from you, if we don't actually have this in a venue, we need you to acknowledge you've received them and to let us know if you are happy with what's in it. And if you're not, to let us know that too. Because if you don't do this, if you don't let us know you've got these papers, then we won't have a quorum. And that means that the AGM won't be valid. So that is also really important. Now, this is an update on the problem with this laser light coming from a chip shop, which didn't get planning permission. And Eric and I think Lisa have been writing and complaining that this laser is actually happening. So this is the council writing to Eric with regard to his complaint to provide an update in relation to the high number of complaints for this case. So it looks like a lot of people are not at all happy with this. Now, the local planning authority have to go through various loops and hoops in order to, before they can actually address the problem. But they've even discussed the problem with the Inverness Airport and Police Scotland. So this is a serious matter. So we'll keep you posted. And as Eric said at the start, the weather has been dire. So we've had no observing sessions. We do plan to have guides and cubs up at the observatory on the 3rd and the 15th of March, whatever the weather. We don't expect them just to look at the cloud. We do have activities planned for them. And then Eric's talk to the British Astronomical Association has been really successful. This was on his all sky camera. It's now on the BAA YouTube channel, and there have been a lot of views so far. So really, congratulations, Eric. Because of course, talking to the BAA, that's countrywide. It's not just in up here in the Highlands of Scotland. So that is getting himself and us, all of us, known too. And finally, a very special happy birthday to Pat Escott. Now, it's rude to give you the age of a lady, so I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'm sure that you can guess that it's a particular one with an O at the end of it. Now, when Arthur became this age, Pat organised a cake. And these were some of the things that she did in the background as a committee member. She's been a committee member for years, and she's still a committee member, working, doing lots and lots of bits and pieces. So I'm sorry that we can't provide you with a cake, Pat, but our very best wishes go out to you today for your birthday, which was on Saturday. And here we have your gallery of photographs. Now, this first photograph is actually by Pat, and although it was given to us on the 1st of February, it wouldn't have looked like this, because the 1st of February was a new moon. So this must have been taken maybe 26th of January or so. And I just love the color of the sky. We have a crescent moon taken by Dave on the 4th. So that's a few days after the new moon. And you can see that the crescent moon is facing the west, where it is gradually waxing. Here it is on the 5th of February. And then Anthony has taken this stunning photograph of the moon on the same evening. And then on the 6th, we have it a little bit better. And look at the terminator with the crisp craters that you can see here. And then we have Eric Walker's moon, which, although he's put down the 6th, it's a bit bigger. So either Anthony's or Eric's were taken at maybe slightly different times. But this is a 6.7 day old waxing crescent moon. And then Eric has colored it. And this brings out the different minerals on the moon. So we have blue tones, which indicate soils that are higher in titanium. Brown tones, the soils are higher in iron in these places. And we have Yvonne Hare taking an image to show the V and the X. And this was a challenge from Eric at one point. So congratulations, Yvonne. And if we had a prize, you would get it. And then on the 9th, we've got a little bit more of the moon. And again, Eric has colored it with this false color. We have a very atmospheric, two atmospheric photographs by Dave on the 10th of February. And this is one on the 14th. And it's interesting because that evening when I was in Gloucestershire, I looked out of the window and there was the moon. And that's something that always amazes me, that wherever you are in the world, if you look at the moon, you're seeing the same thing. Now, we had the demise of Henrietta the spider last year, but look who's here. So this might be one of her offspring, that big spider, and Eric has called it Henry Maximus. So we'll see whether we see more of him. Some nice deep sky photographs from Dennis, who has observatories in Port Mahomet near Tain. So this is Comet 67P, and you can see the tail quite beautifully. This is Comet Atlas, and it looks as though it's heading straight towards us. This is M37. There's an open star cluster in Auriga. And now we have some photographs of the aurora, which were absolutely beautiful. And typically, of course, being in Gloucestershire, I missed it all. So we have a series of photographs by Lisa, who was trying to win against the weather. We have this glorious image here of a clear sky with the aurora. And then the clouds gradually come in. You can still see the red through the clouds. And then they completely envelop the aurora. And then it snowed. And Lisa said she was actually caught in the snow for a little while, couldn't move. But look at this wonderful sky with the green and the rays and this reddish color up above. And this is what Dennis caught that particular night. Incredibly bright aurora, absolutely beautiful. And then, of course, we've got our friends in Orkney. So this is Tingwall in Orkney. So Sue Shackleton has taken images of the aurora. You can see the rays from behind the cloud, and then it really ramps up. So despite the cloud, there are lots of clear patches, and that enables you to see the aurora really clearly. And this is gorgeous. Look at that green, that really strong green color. And here we have the Milky Way. Notice we have got Cassiopeia. This time of year in spring, if you look north, you're more likely to see Cassiopeia than you are to see the plough, because plough is now the other side of us, because remember, everything has rotated around the pole star throughout the last 6 months. And this is another glorious image on that same evening. And then on the 10th, this is what Eric was talking about with all the reds and pinks and purples, absolutely stunning. And there was a lot to see. And then you've got the green below, and the rays start off green and then go into red. So you can see it fading a bit, but you've got Valhalla's arch here, or bridge. And there it is again, still with all this pink and red above it. And then the bridge or the auroral arc expands, so it's higher in the sky. And this is known as auroral art. So Eric is here copying Lisa, is the photograph that she took. Not sure if it was last month or the month before. And this is a really stunning image, Lisa. Very red, really dark skies here, and you've got the snow on Ben Wyvis. And then you've got the green of the aurora over on this side. And of course, the further north you are, the brighter the aurora. And once again, we have these glorious greens and reds. And here is the curtain folding back on itself. Now, Eric put in these graphs just to try and explain exactly what to expect when you're looking for an aurora. And the substorm strength is really the strength of the aurora and whether or not you're likely to see an aurora. And he's circled these two areas here, despite this one being the better one, but this took place at 5 in the afternoon or early evening, so you wouldn't have seen it. But basically, what you want is this graph to go all the way down into the negative numbers, as negative as you possibly can. And then that's really nice and strong. With this particular graph, we have the interplanetary magnetic field strength known as BT. And the interplanetary magnetic field is the same as the sun's magnetic field, but it's known as the interplanetary magnetic field because it extends outwards and encompasses all the planets and then messes around with their magnetic fields. And you want it above this line, which says 10, and the higher the number, the better. So if it was 20, that would be considered a moderate strength. If it was 30, that would be really strong. But if it's above 10, that's pretty good going. So that's what we would want. And then the orientation, which is known as a BZ. And you need the orientation, ideally, to be south. And that's because the North's magnetic field the Earth's magnetic field only points north, whereas the interplanetary magnetic field can point north and south. Now, when you've got two magnets, you want opposing poles so that they stick together. And that's why you want a southern interplanetary magnetic field, so that it disturbs Earth's north-facing interplanetary magnetic field. And then that sort of opens the door into our magnetic field and allows all these charged particles to come in, which then crash into our atmosphere. And the atoms and molecules respond by releasing colored light. And that's your aurora in a nutshell. So once again, the more negative this number, the more likely you are to see the aurora, because the interplanetary magnetic field is really south, as south as it can go, if you like. It's not a very scientific term, but basically the more negative, the better it is. So that's what you look for when you find these graphs on aurora websites, particularly the Glendale Aurora app. And this is one of Eric's kiograms that goes along with the sky, all sky camera. I think that's the moon. And you can see where the aurora happens to be. So if you look at the times between 8 and 9, 11 and 3. And then if we have a look at this, come here. If you have a look around this time, there we go. So that's around 7:30. That's the red that we could see. And then if we go a little bit further on, we should see a bit more red. There we go. Look at that. That's really noticeable. That's 10:20. So that was between 10 and 11. And then eventually we'll get a little bit more aurora around 2:15 to 3 o'clock in the morning, which roughly coincides with all the times that we saw with the kilogram and also the graphs. All sky camera showing a bit of meteor space debris. That was in the morning of the 11th. Lisa thought she had seen that bit of space debris until it was realized that hers was in the evening. But look at this, we've got the aurora in the background, so really rather beautiful. Here's a fireball that Eric picked up on his all sky camera, very bright and low because it's below the clouds. And look at this. Now this is from a dash cam from Julie Nicholson. Look in this area here from Lewis, there it is. So if we have another look at it, there we go. That's amazing. So it was picked up on the all sky camera as well as the dash cam. And this was the kilogram from last night, where Eric simply wants to show, look, it was a clear sky last night. It wasn't clear where I was. And once again, we've got it clear. And you can see Orion quite nicely. We've got this satellite here burning up we've got Gemini and Auriga, and we've got the Plough. And what I wanted to show you, now this is not a good example of one of Eric's all-sky cameras because it's got the moon in it, but it's the only one I could find. So this is finding Cancer. There's Orion, belt stars to Sirius, Procyon, Pollux and Castor. And then if we go over this side, we've got the sickle shape of the head of the lion. There's his body. That's Regulus. So a line between Procyon and Regulus, and then completing the triangle up here. So in this area, we will have Cancer. Now, these were the stars in Hydra that I told you to find in binoculars. That, by the way, is Beta, the brightest star in Cancer. If you move your binoculars straight up, there is M44. So you can just see it. And we've got the northern and southern donkeys feeding at the manger. And then we've got Iota up here, and that would be Alpha. So you can see it is possible to find. You don't want the moon in the sky. Without the moon, that would have been really simple. We're expecting great things from Anthony now that he has this ZWO camera, even better than the moon that he showed us. And I found this on the internet, and so many people say, but I wanted to take a photograph of the moon with my mobile camera. And that is all I could get, whereas I could see the moon looking like this. So don't worry, we understand exactly how you feel when you try and take a photograph and it doesn't quite turn out the way you'd hoped. So thank you very much, everyone.
Excellent, Pauline. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Hopefully the weather will become considerably better so we can get a chance to observe the targets you've set us for this month. It's certainly very good tonight at the moment if you're able to get up and get out and stay up. The beehive cluster, that was one of the first clusters that actually fascinated me, and I tried to hunt it down. And it's especially good through binoculars, which you mentioned.
Easy to find in binoculars.
It is, but
really
it's wonderful, and there are it must be hundreds of stars, honestly, and it's beautiful. It just looks great. And if you don't attempt to find any other object this month, make the effort to go and view this one. And I have just checked on my all-sky cam, and I can easily see M44 now, Pauline. It is very easy. It's definitely a smudge in the sky.
Yeah, it is good.
Yeah. And just, can I give my very best wishes to Pat on her special birthday? She deserves them all. So happy birthday, Pat. Anyway, that's us for tonight. I'd like to take the opportunity to let visitors know that you can currently join our astronomy club for next to nothing for the next couple of months. So if you want to get a low-cost flavour of what and how we do things, please get in touch with us after the meeting by email, website, Facebook or Messenger, and we'll get things moving along for you. Thanks to everyone for coming along, and thanks again to David and Pauline for their excellent talks tonight. Clear skies and keep looking up.